You're about to open a volume whose pages serve as a mirror to the darkest corners of eternity. What lies within is not a tale of science fiction, but a chronicle of visions, warnings, and revelations. The witnesses span centuries, saints and mystics, medieval monks and modern visionaries, all claiming a fleeting, dreadful glimpse of what awaits the damned. Let's go to hell here on Things Visible and Invisible. Dr. Paul Thigpen is a retired theology professor and the best-selling author of 60 books, including Saints Who Battled Satan, 17 Holy Warriors Who Can Teach You How to Fight the Good Fight and Vanquish Your Ancient Enemy. And he joins me down the line from his home in Georgia. Paul, welcome to Things Visible and Invisible.
Thank you, Seán. Great to be here.
Paul, when I came across your work, I was fascinated by this idea that saints, the holy ones, had somehow experienced hell. But I suppose we better start with a definition. A lot of people watching this will have no idea what hell is, and there's probably a good proportion of that will probably doubt its existence, something no doubt you're going to convince us of by the end of it. But let's have a definition. What exactly is hell?
I guess in the Christian tradition, you could say that hell is understood to be the final definitive state of self-exclusion, one excluding oneself from the love of God, from friendship with God, and that's from everything good that flows from God.
Okay, it's as simple as that. It's a self-exclusion. So the idea that we have in our minds of some place where the devil drags you off to and there's people running around with little prongs in red tights, that's not really a Christian idea?
Well, what you get is throughout, and the book includes some stories like that. You get throughout the 2,000 years of Christian history, the visions and dreams, and sometimes just literary descriptions of what might it be like to be definitively self-excluded from the glory and love of God. And the church teaches that these visions are often symbolic. If they speak of literal hell, of hell with literal fires, for instance, that perhaps there's something equivalent to our fire, but we're talking about something beyond life as we know it. And so the fire probably, which is an image Jesus himself used, is more a matter of the notion of destruction and of pain.
Now, it's interesting you mention that because some people associate hell with a kind of Old Testament idea of retribution of some sort. But actually, hell is referenced quite considerably in the New Testament, right?
It is, beginning with Jesus himself, his words in the gospel. And then you, you find in other parts of the New Testament, and you find it in the teaching of the Catholic Church and other churches throughout the last 2,000 years. Primarily because of the doctrine of free will, I would say. The notion in Christian teaching that God has made us in his own image, and one part of that image is that we are able to make free choices. We have a free will. We actually have a little portion, you might say, an echo maybe, of God's own freedom to choose. And if we have that kind of freedom, then it's the most basic kind of choice that a creature can make once created, is to say to the Creator, yes or no. To say, I want to love you, embrace you, follow your will. I know what's best for me to live in unity and joy with you. Or to say, no, I want to do it my own way. I reject you. I reject your will. That's the most basic choice that's given to any person. And if that choice is there, then you have to be open to the possibility of what we call hell. That in the end, that God would not override your free will and say, you must love me, you must choose me, you must live with me forever. But to say, in an echo of the Lord's Prayer, your will be done to the creature.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so We've had obviously people talking about ghostly visitations of one sort or another from the next world, which is a rather general term. Nobody's quite sure where they're coming from or indeed who they are that's coming from that next world. Your list of witnesses, your list of people who say they have been to hell are, well, they're not the usual list. They're not the people you would expect to be in hell. How did you come across, or what gave you the idea that there was a book about saints who had actually visited hell?
Well, I think we have to understand that the notion of a saint is someone that who, in the end, has chosen God, is fully united with Him in love, lives with Him in heaven, has a share in His own nature, and so the saints that we talk about, they're kind of, because we're talking about their human life, while they're still on earth, a merely human life, that they're not fully perfected yet. So they're kind of saints in the making, you might say. And so it's possible that, first of all, that some of those folks might actually encounter, either through God's revelation. I think most of them would say they weren't physically in hell, but that they had a vision or dream of hell. They saw it. That it makes sense that they might be skirting around hell before they come to the place of perfection. But also some of them, some of the occasions are something like near-death experiences. And those folks weren't necessarily canonized saints of the church, but would describe near-death experiences. When they came back, they would talk about what they saw. But in other cases, people like Saint Faustina, who wrote basically about God's mercy. Her whole life was dedicated to writing and convincing people of God's mercy. She had visions of hell as well. And the point of that was to help us see that God's mercy, in His mercy, God desires to help us escape the horror that it would be to be definitively excluded from Him for eternity. And so hell becomes kind of a way of, visions of hell become a way of helping us appreciate how wonderful heaven is and how we should desire it with all our heart and not let anything keep us from ending up there instead of in this state of exclusion from God in His life.
Now, I think this is an important distinction to make, what you're making here, Paul, which is that the saints we're talking about had visions of hell. Because am I right in thinking in Catholic theology that once you're in hell, there's no escape hatch?
Yes, well, once, I guess you would say, once you have died and are in hell, yes, there's no coming back, and that's backed up by gospel parable that Jesus told. And I think the church allows that someone would have visions of hell, whether they actually went there in the sense of somehow moving into a location that was hell. I think that's kind of open, but the notion that they're allowed to see it and to witness it and even to feel some of the pains of it, they weren't dead at that point. They were simply being allowed to see it for their own purpose, to help them realize how high the stakes were, or so that they could come and tell others about it, how high the stakes were. Absolutely. And so that's very different from the notion of dying and then getting to come back.
Absolutely. And a theological idea of visit is very different from our idea of visiting a place on holiday or something, where you physically go somewhere, as you say, to a location. So it's a state, it's something. Anyway, we're not going to get too much into the weeds of the theology on this, as fascinating as it is. Let's start with some of your witnesses, Paul. Who would you line up first if you were meeting a skeptic who really thought, hell, not so sure?
Well, it's the kind of thing that it would be maybe if someone has already decided it can't be, and they've rejected the notion that we have free will, or even the notion that God exists, and we have a loving Creator, then yes, it might be hard for anything a saint or anyone else says to convince them otherwise. You have to have prior convictions, such as the existence of a loving God from whom all good things flow, life and joy and health and peace and all the rest, and that excluding yourself from Him, turning away from Him forever, would then become a place of the most horrible torment. So, but I think the purpose of the book was to help people see that with the visions, sometimes dreams, of some of the saints and other folks, that this is not just a matter of the church trying to bludgeon people into obeying or commands or something. That it's something that flows naturally out of the words of Jesus, who most people accept as at least a good teacher. That he made it clear that it's possible to cut yourself off from the source of all life, who is God the Father Himself, and that because of this, um, to help us imagine, I guess you might say, to help us get a taste of, in particular ways, what that kind of misery would be, what that kind of self-exclusion would be, that he allowed these folks then to have a glimpse of it, and in symbolic terms. And even as early as Pope St. Gregory the Great in the 6th century is talking, answering a question from someone about, well, do you think, because he wrote about some of these visions, not that he had, but others, do you think that that these things are literal and they don't always agree? Are they in different parts of hell when they see these things? But his reply was, the visions that they get are probably largely symbolic. And you think about it, when you begin to realize what would be the torture, the torment of being definitively forever excluded from every goodness, every kind of goodness that flows from God. The implications of that, once you start thinking about it, are very sobering. And so this is how the visions go. They show people in total despair, in total isolation, total self-absorption, tormented by the others who are in the same situation. And what might that be like? And that's a good thing if you are at least are willing to consider the possibility of hell, to look at that and see how the kinds of things they describe are simply would be a natural outworking of the very definition of what hell is, for people to say no to God forever and cut themselves off from every good thing that comes from Him.
In your researches, Paul, what was the most surprising aspect of hell that you came across?
Wow, I'd studied it, for years and thought about it, so maybe not too many surprises. But I guess I did begin to think about, because of these visions, how much of the torment, even if it's a torment of the resurrected body, which is, the Catholic Church teaches, yes, our bodies are resurrected, even those who are damned, and that the bodies will take part in the torment, just as our souls do. But to realize that in the end, the most horrible part of it would be the soul's kind of self-torture, you might say. I once actually, the only novel I ever wrote, the first version was called Gehenna, which is an ancient name for hell, New Testament name. There's and a later version was published called My Visit to Hell. I didn't like that title. I didn't choose it. But anyway, I have a section in there, and it's what it is. It's kind of a modern reimagining of Dante's Inferno, his epic poetry about hell, which is amazing. The whole thing. He also talks about heaven and purgatory, but he's following largely the theology of St. Thomas Aquinas, and had studied him very deeply. And to have a scene in there where someone in hell is talking to another and says, when I was a kid, I was always afraid of the monster under the bed, but this is a much more horrible thing. I realize now the monster is in me and I'm in the monster. I can't get away from it because I am the monster. And I think that's a very powerful insight when you realize how a soul definitively excluded from the life of God and love of God, how it would collapse in on itself, what kind of torment, inner torment it would have, even if there was nothing to torment it from the outside, how the inner torment would be. And especially if that person then was surrounded by other people like that. I think about Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter, that kind of character, a kind of asylum for criminally insane. What would it be like to be locked in with thousands, millions of other people, perhaps like that, for eternity? What you would do to yourself and what you would do to each other is as horrible as anything else.
Sobering. Paul, talk to me about what role, if any, the devil, the demons have in this entity, this place called hell.
Well, the church doesn't get real specific, but it does say that Satan, who was once an archangel, rebelled against God, thought that he could say no to God and make himself God. That the devil was the hell was created for the devil and his angels, his followers, the angels who fell with him. And by our usually giving in to temptation from him, but by our own choice, we ally ourselves with him. And so he's the one who helps he and his followers do the most to try to draw us to hell. Misery loves company. They are excluded in the end definitively from the life of God, and they want to draw as many people with them as they can, because misery loves company, but also because the devil can't get back at God directly. He hates God. He rebelled against God. He detests God with everything in him. He can't get back at God, and so what does he do? He goes after the image of God and the children of God, and that's who we are, to try to bring us to have to live with him, and then to kind of, I don't know, for me it's almost like there's some way apparently where he almost feeds on the fear and the rage and all the other the evil. That's getting speculative and also kind of a imagery I'm talking about, but for sure he some of us may remember from the first Gulf War and what happened in Iraq, how when Saddam Hussein was overthrown but not yet captured, and the people who hated him because of his rule, one of the first things they did was to go out into the public square in Baghdad and pull down a statue of him and then start stomping on it and insulting it, throwing their shoes at it, which in that culture apparently was a very high insult. Until he was caught, they couldn't get their hands on him, so that's how they did it. And that goes way back. Back in the early centuries of the church, there was an emperor who did something horrible in a particular town, and they turned out and did the same thing to the images of him in town. So it makes sense to me. It's the same kind of principle that the devil can't get directly at God to try to injure him. So he goes after his images, and he goes after his children. I know that how the devil is with me. There are many times when, in order to come after me, he's tried to come after my children. So that's kind of their role to help get us there. To what extent they're all bound only to hell for now, that's kind of hard to say. Church leaves open and does talk about the activity of demons in the world now. So they're not totally bound to hell, but they certainly are at the heart of it.
Fascinating. Now we're coming to the end of this episode, Paul. Just if you could succinctly give us perhaps the most striking vision of hell from one of your saints. If you could name the saint and name, very succinctly, as I say, just give us a quick insight, a quick vignette of that experience of witnessing hell.
Oh, I think you find this in more than one account. The notion of total, absolute isolation. And not just of isolation, the damned person, but of being closed in. And so, for instance, in Dante's vision of hell in the Inferno, the souls of the suicides, and that's a whole different matter for us to talk about, but he saw that their punishment as kind of being locked inside of trees for eternity that couldn't move. And for someone who's ever had any, who's ever felt, that they don't want to be enclosed in, that would be a terrible one. But the isolation of it, the fact that you are, in a sense, utterly alone for eternity. You may even be attacked by others, but you have no source of love and life and all the other things, and you're on your own completely. That to me is especially scary.
For now, Paul, tell people where they can find out more about you and where they can pick up a copy of one of your many books, including The Saints Who Witnessed Hell.
Well, you can go for this book to tanbooks.com. It's the publisher there. You can also get it on Amazon. You can go to your local Catholic bookstore and get a copy.
For now, Paul, thank you so much for coming on Things Visible and Invisible.
Thank you, Seán. God bless you and all your listeners.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Things Visible and Invisible. We're dedicated to uncovering phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality, from ancient enigmas and paranormal encounters to scientific anomalies and forgotten histories. If you enjoyed this journey into the mysterious and unexplained, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell to stay updated on future explorations. Have a personal experience or story that aligns with our investigations? We'd love to hear from you. Visit our website at tvi.show and reach out through our contact form. While we can't feature every submission, we review them all, and your story might be featured in an upcoming episode. To support our continued investigations, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter or channel member. Your contributions make these explorations possible and give you access to exclusive content, early releases, and monthly behind-the-scenes discussions with our team. Don't forget to check out our merch store. We've got everything from TVI branded t-shirts and hoodies to stickers and coffee mugs, perfect for showing your support while keeping the mysteries close. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time as we continue to explore the things visible and invisible.